Hello, listeners. I'm here to tell you something that might surprise you. You don't have to work for a difficult boss. That's right, you heard me. If you're feeling trapped by a boss that's critical and unsupportive, you don't have to settle. And here's why it matters. Continuing to work in such an environment can actually have serious consequences to your health. So come back and join me for episode 62, where we'll talk about it all right here on the Career Woman's Secret Playbook podcast.
Are you a strong, independent woman who's passionate about her career? Then this podcast is perfect for you. Based on her book, The Career Woman's Secret Playbook, career coach Dr. Dawn Hamby shares the kind of insider secrets you can only know if you've hired, fired, and promoted employees over the past 30 years.
Ladies, I'm on a mission to help busy women just like you create a career and life you love without sacrificing your work-life balance to get it. Come join me as we inspire and motivate each other only as women can and have lots of fun along the way.
With Dr. Dawn's tools, strategies, and action steps, you can unleash your personal and professional power in a whole new way. Here's today's episode.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Career Woman's Secret Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Dawn, and I'm so glad you found our podcast. If you're new to our audience, I want to thank you for tuning into today's episode. And as a thank you for listening, I want you to head over to DrDawnShopTalk.com. I've got some terrific free resources just for you, again, as a thank you for tuning in. And if you're one of our loyal listeners, thank you so much for coming back each and every week. We appreciate you so much. And of course, it goes without saying, we would love for you to be part of our community of amazing professional women. So consider hitting that plus sign and subscribing. All right, you guys, are you ready to get into it? Let's start with the research. Do you remember in the intro when I was telling you that working for a difficult boss can actually have serious health consequences? Well, you guys, the research is really interesting on this. Studies show that employees who are working for bosses that are defined as having low empathy, right? So these are folks that just never really can understand your point of view. They don't seem to be very sympathetic or empathetic at all to what other people are going through. Have you met this person? So listen to today's episode, take the action steps, because I'm going to give you 4 powerful strategies that you can put in place right now so that you can take back the reins, because it really is in your control. And I know it doesn't feel like that when you're miserable at work and your boss is making it that much harder. Just remember, your mental health and well-being is just too important. In fact, guys, all throughout our podcast today, you've heard this before if you've been listening. If I have other videos I think can help you, I'm going to make reference to those. They're always going to be in your show notes on the pod. So you can scroll on down the show notes and find those links. If you're watching us on YouTube, then just head over to that description box. Just click on more and all the links will be there for you as well. So talking about setting those healthy boundaries, right? To make sure that you're taking care of yourself, both professionally and personally. I've got a wonderful playlist of videos I think can help. So again, I'll be sure to include that in your show notes and in the description. So be sure to check that out. All right, you guys, I'm going to give you, as I mentioned before, 4 powerful strategies to help you. This is the kind of advice I would give you if you were one of my clients right now. So let's talk about this first strategy and what you can do. Strategy number 1 is what I mentioned just a minute ago, setting those clear boundaries. Now, I mentioned that playlist I have on setting healthy boundaries, both at the office and at home, but also make sure you're taking time for self-care. This is the first thing that gets put on the back burner, and I get it. When you're stressed at work and you're overworked and underappreciated, the last thing you think you have time for is self-care. But you know that self-care, I preach this all the time, it's not selfish, and it actually can increase your productivity. So if you're struggling to make that happen, before we can even look at healthy boundaries, take a look at my health and wellness secret videos and check those out, because it can kind of get you in that right frame of mind so that you're even more confident in terms of setting those healthy boundaries. So let's again talk about How to do that. Just remember setting healthy boundaries, whether you're at the office or at home, is reasonable. It's not unreasonable to expect people to respect you and to respect those boundaries that you've set. Many times people don't think they can do that at the office, especially when it comes to the boss, but you definitely can. Just be professional, be respectful, always respect the position. Even if your boss is driving you crazy and you don't like that boss at all, personally, in or out of the office, remember to always respect the position. But remember, you have rights as an employee. Confronting the problem, remember, does not have to be confrontational. When I work with clients, for example, I will actually script out examples of things that they could say. So again, they're coming across in a powerful, assertive way, but not aggressive. And sometimes when it comes to women, unfortunately, even in 2024, sometimes when we're being assertive and standing up for ourselves, it can be misconstrued as aggressive, particularly for our male bosses and male colleagues. If you think you're being treated unfairly, of course, all the tips and strategies and tools I'm going over in the podcast and on our YouTube channel, these are guidelines. These are things I want you to try. But if you exhaust all of these kinds of strategies and you're getting nowhere, don't forget, you've got resources available to you. Even if it's a small company and you don't have a huge HR department, there is someone in charge of hiring, mentoring, helping out with onboarding, you name it. Go to that person and kind of let them know what's going on. But before you do any of that, I want you to have that difficult conversation with your boss. And remember, it doesn't have to be difficult. I use that word because, it makes people uncomfortable, obviously, to have a conversation that can be a little awkward. But you, my friend, are going to feel so much better. You're going to feel really proud of yourself that you made the effort. Remember, you're responsible for the effort, not the outcome. But if you don't take any action at all and you let things continue, you will get increasingly resentful. That will affect your performance, and then your boss will have something to complain about. That's the irony. Also, if you continue not to set those healthy boundaries, human nature is sometimes that you'll just take advantage. Not because human nature, at least in my worldview, it's not like this. I don't think people naturally are just trying to be terrible people. I just think it's human nature to kind of take the easy way out. And if you have someone at the office who's always willing to go the extra mile, even if they're sacrificing their own time and energy and mental health, well, if you know the person's going to help you or get the job done, you tend to gravitate towards that person. Do I want you to be the go-to person who does amazing at your work? Of course I do. I just don't want you to spread yourself too thin, and it's not necessary. You shouldn't be taking on your job and everybody else's. And sometimes the boss just doesn't understand how long certain tasks will take. So again, if you have that conversation, let them know what the issues are, ask them for guidance on what projects should be your priority, because working way into the evening and, working weekends and sacrificing your personal time with your family really should be the last resort. It shouldn't be the go-to at your office. Now, there are certain professions where FaceTime, in other words, being there in person and working crazy hours, are really rewarded. But that viewpoint is getting, luckily, less and less approval. Less and less people are willing to sacrifice work-life balance because we're seeing the health detriment. We're seeing how it's impacting everybody's health, both physically and mentally. And in the long run, that company does suffer. Now, if you're working for a company that really does reward those long hours, then again, you still need to have that conversation, see what parameters and limits are considered to be reasonable. If your boss and you really disagree, again, reach out to HR, talk to a mentor, talk to a colleague, and come up with something that's agreeable to you both. If you exhaust, again, all four of these strategies, then we'll talk about when it's time to leave or pivot. That's coming up later in today's episode, so stay tuned for that. All right, strategy number 2, I want you to find allies and build support. In other words, you heard me talk earlier about finding a mentor or talking to a colleague, building that circle of support. I mentioned that practically in every episode because it's so important, both in your personal life and definitely in your professional one. So build your network, start attending networking events, make yourself visible, even if it's just publishing an article every now and then on LinkedIn or at least posting something about your industry. You want to build that credibility. And the way to do that is to increase your visibility. So you've heard me mention this before as well. Increasing your visibility really does lead to increasing that credibility and ultimately that profitability for both you and your company. So having those allies are not only going to build that circle of support and your network, it actually helps you build your brand. Now, I've talked about this a lot on the podcast. I even just had a recent workshop about building your brand called 21 Action Steps to Building Your Professional and Personal Brand. If you want more info about that, check out our website. There is a virtual option to that workshop if you missed our last one. It's a workshop I offer each and every quarter, kind of quarter four. So it's always offered usually in October. But one of the reasons I offer that workshop to our audience and folks who can attend in person is because building your brand really is the secret sauce to really growing professionally. Going up that corporate ladder looks different today than it did in the past. And one of the ways that you can get through working with a difficult boss, and while you're doing that, setting those healthy boundaries with your boss and educating your boss on how you thrive. So a way to do that is through your network, because your network can come to your, defense. They can kind of go to bat for you. You don't even have to lift a finger. So for example, if your boss, who we've already established is difficult, is making some sort of complaint, not an official complaint, but they're venting and they're venting to a colleague. Maybe they're venting to another boss about you, but that other boss already knows how amazing your brand is. Well, guess what? If you've built that relationship with that person, and again, be authentic. Don't build this network just to try to cover your butt, so to speak. That doesn't work. People really know when you're doing that, right? They know when you're being authentic. They know when you really care about learning about their business and their brand as well. And you're not always selling, and trying to just, get them on your side in case there's ever a coup at the office. That's different. I want you to build those authentic relationships. And when you do, if something was to happen down the line where your boss again is being difficult and is venting to another colleague or another superior in the company, that person, if you've built that relationship with them, they're going to go to bat for you. Like I said, they're going to say, oh no, there's no way Dawn would have done that. You must have misunderstood. That's the kind of thing they're going to say on your behalf, again, because you've already proven that your brand is a reputable one, that you're going to do what you say, that you're not going to overpromise and underdeliver. No, don't do that. Oh my gosh, you guys, I saw a recent example of that. That is the fastest way to kill your reputation. In other words, to kill your brand. So whatever you do, don't do that. All right, let's move on to our third power strategy. This one I'm calling invest in yourself. That's right, ladies. You're already doing that by listening to a podcast about this very subject. Okay, this isn't some true crime podcast. Although now that I think about it, some of you may have been imagining doing something to your boss. Hopefully not anything you could get arrested for. Okay, I don't want this to be a true crime podcast in that sense, okay? I want this to be a safe place where you can listen to topics like these and you realize you're not alone out there. We've all have had, unfortunately, even yours truly here who loves everything about leadership. I've had amazing bosses and I've had some, unfortunately, that were not that amazing. And when I felt that they were not respecting my boundaries, or if I felt like I wasn't being appreciated or heard or valued, then again, I put my big girl pants on and I had those conversations. 99% of the time, the boss was unaware and fixed the problem, I promise you. Now, I have had a boss in the past that was very difficult no matter what I did, but I played my cards right. I kept them close to my vest. I spent a little time learning and growing. And when I was ready, it was time to pivot. Now, I felt blessed that didn't happen to me often, but I believe the reason it only happened to me once in a 31-year career is because I had worked hard on my brand and I naturally was good about asking for things, asking for help, asking for guidance. I always came from a place of abundance and strength. So, in other words, I always presumed my boss had my best interests at heart. Did I call people and complain about the boss? Did I talk about the boss? Absolutely, but not at work. No, I complained at home. Because unless I truly knew you and knew that you could keep my confidences, I wasn't going to complain about the boss. I just thought that wasn't the classy thing to do, number one. And number two, unless you're truly in my inner circle, I really wasn't that trusting. And I hate to say that when I have such a positive viewpoint. I just felt like it wasn't because the person would intentionally try to sabotage me. I wasn't coming from that place. I was more or less coming from the place of the fact that if that boss was rude to them or was freaking them out and threatening them in any way, or that person was scared to lose their job, that if they had information about something I was saying that could possibly put me in a position of being thrown under the bus so they could save their own job, I could see somebody might get tempted to do that, or maybe they would do that in the heat of the moment and feel terrible that they said that, or it was misconstrued in that way. So again, I always felt and gave my colleagues the benefit of the doubt unless they proved me wrong. And if they did, then I addressed it. You might have caught my story in last week's episode about a time when I had to do that. Again, if you followed strategy number 1 and number 2, these other power strategies, by the time you get to number 3, you're not going to really need this as much because it's going to be so rare that you're going to have to invest in yourself in this way. Now, do I want you to invest in your professional and personal growth? Absolutely. Do that throughout your entire career. And again, listening to a podcast like this is a great way to invest in yourself because you're learning tips and tools and strategies from someone who is in the business of coaching and consulting. You're learning from someone who's been both a boss and an employee. So I know what it's like to sit on both sides of that desk. So I got you. I feel you. I know what it's like. Okay. So whether you ever hire our company for coaching or consulting or workshops or whatever, whoever you hire, make sure that they understand what it's like to actually be a boss because it really is a different world. You know, management is not for the faint of heart. I promise you. There's a whole other ball of wax, a whole other, I don't know, set of problems that you may not even realize about unless you're actually there. Does it excuse a boss being difficult and unreasonable and disrespectful? Absolutely not. But just like with any other industry or occupation, you have your great ones and you have your not so great ones. The problem really is that when that not so great one is actually in a position of authority, it can really wreak havoc throughout the organization in a pretty big way. So again, I want you to invest in yourself so that if you do need to pivot, you have taken the time to learn a skill set that you can really highlight. I want you to spend the time before you ever do consider leaving. I want you to spend the time becoming that expert. Become the go-to person at your organization because your boss has a boss and your boss's boss has a boss. And if you work hard, now let me go back. If you work smarter, not harder, okay? I don't want you to exhaust yourself at work. Now, do I want you to be scared to put in 10, 12-hour days sometimes? No, please don't do that. Let your work ethic be your resume. It just doesn't need to be 10, 12 hours a day every single day, because if that's the case, somebody is misappropriating their time. They really are. Do we all have those big deadlines where we all have to put in extra hours? Absolutely. But unless you're working for the top legal firm in the country, or you're a trauma surgeon, okay, where your hours are going to be intense, unless that's really necessary to your particular profession, and that's why those kinds of professions, right, can demand those salaries because you're paid for your time. But there are other times where your time is not respected. Time is a commodity. That's why we're willing to pay those professionals those top dollars because they never get that time back. They're going to miss countless recitals, weddings, anniversaries, and birthdays. I know what that's like. I'm a doctor. I'm not a medical doctor, and I purposely chose to go the PhD route. My father's a retired surgeon, and although initially I was going to go into practice with him, because I'm one of the few members of my family that does not get grossed out by the blood and the guts and all those things, and I'm fascinated by surgery, but I realized I didn't love medicine the way he did. And I saw how hard he worked and how many big life events he tried to make. And he really did make practically all of them. But his time really was not his own until he was fully retired. So I wanted more of a work-life balance for myself. I think it's easier in medical practices today because I have other family members that are still in medicine. And it does seem like it's a little easier to have more vacation time, but it wasn't like that years ago. And so for me, I knew that I wanted more work-life balance. And so I went the education route and the professional consulting and coaching route, which lends me and affords me more time, right? So again, invest in yourself, really look at the time and how it's being used. And again, unless it's a demanding job where you really do have to put in that many hours to be effective, you're going to need to have those uncomfortable conversations and see if you can turn things around. If you can't, then we need to move on. After you've invested in yourself, remember, don't leave immediately. Give yourself an opportunity to make a plan to go elsewhere. That's going to lead us to our fourth power strategy I'm calling consider your options. Remember, you always have a choice. It doesn't feel like that. When bills have to be paid, maybe you're on your own. I've shared this story before, but I was a single mom for 14 years. I have a wonderful ex-husband. We're friends now, okay? We weren't friends necessarily back then in the thick of it, but we're friends now. And I chose to be a single mom for 14 years before I was ready to really invest the time in a brand new relationship. So I was very honest with anyone who wanted to go out on a date that I was just not in the marrying space. So we could have dinner dates and enjoy each other's company, but my priority was my daughter. I didn't want anyone living with us. I didn't want to be responsible for anybody else but myself and my daughter. That worked for me. That may not be a solution for everybody, but I'm telling you, it was a powerful place for me because I felt like I only had myself to answer to. And it also reminded me that I always had choices. I have choices about who I surround myself with. I also have choices about what I choose to do for work. And if I need extra money, I don't have to rely on someone else. I can get a second job. And I did. I was teaching at the time that I chose to get divorced from my now ex-husband. And when I chose to leave, I made a plan, like I'm telling you to do. And luckily for me, I was very happy with my job. But I knew as a school teacher, I was going to need to probably move into administration because I was going to need to make more money to be able to provide a safer neighborhood for my daughter now that I was going from a 2-income household to a 1-income household. So what did I do? I considered my options. So I stayed with my school district. I got a second job. I love fashion. You probably can tell if you're watching on YouTube. If I show up in a t-shirt and no makeup on, you guys, I love makeup. I'm sorry if you don't like somebody who works out with her lashes on. I'm just not the person for you. But I believe in accepting all kinds, right? So you got to accept those of us who like a little glam and are unapologetic for it. I am unapologetic about my femininity. I will stand by that all day, every day. And as a result, I knew that I could get not only extra money by taking on a second job until I was ready, certification wise and degree wise, and all of that, to be able to put my hat in the ring for a higher paying job in administration. And so what I did is I got a job at the Limited Corporation. At the time, the Limited not only had wonderful clothes and jewelry and accessories, but they also at the time owned Express. They also owned Bath and Body Works, and they also owned Victoria's Secret. Now, can I just get real for a minute? Hello, I love all of those companies, okay? And as a single mom, if I could get money coming in and a discount, a pretty substantial one, that was going to be budget friendly and it was going to give me time to truly make a plan on what I could do next. So, by making that plan and investing in my own professional development, I got the certifications I needed. I finished my doctorate, which meant the school district. Schools are so great about this. They will pay teachers not only for their expertise, but their level of education. And on the salary schedule we used at the time in Little Rock, Arkansas, that was a substantial difference in salary. Then I was ready to go into administration. So here comes the wonderful Department of Career Education. Now I think it's the Division of Career Education. Anyway, it's gone through some changes since then, but I was able to join forces with them and become their public school program advisor for the state. And when I did that again, my salary went up even more so. That was the beginning of me continuing to work for the beautiful state of Arkansas, rising through the ranks, becoming directors of larger and larger programs on behalf of not just schools, but then I expanded over into businesses and got to work on the business side of education, which brought me here as a business and education consultant and coach. So all roads lead to Rome. Just have faith in yourself. Remember, betting on yourself is never wrong. And remember, investing in your own professional development is not only going to help you keep your sanity while you're dealing with that difficult boss, but remember, you always have options. Now, if it's so horrible that you really do need to leave, you need to contact human resources immediately. There are ways that you can get additional income. You can obviously always apply for unemployment if it comes to that. But just remember, you always have choices. You can choose to, for example, and I did this, instead of continuing to own my home, I sold my home. Now, of course, I had to split everything with my ex-husband, but I was happy to do that. And I moved into a smaller home and I decided to rent a home instead of renting an apartment. I wanted to give my daughter the same type of lifestyle. And she loved having a backyard and dogs in the backyard, things like that. So again, I had a choice. Did I want to stay in my beautiful neighborhood? I kind of did. But now going from a 2 income to a 1 income, I had to sell my dream home. And I was willing to do that because again, I wanted to have a life that fulfilled me and I wanted to have healthy boundaries, both professionally and personally. And that was the way to do that. So over those 14 years, as I continued to invest in myself, you guys, everything I'm telling you to do really pays off. It paid off for me. It definitely pays off for my clients and with my employees that I've had the privilege to supervise all these many years. Whenever I would have a staff member of mine or an employee of mine who was struggling, I would give them the same advice, right? In my case, I was the boss, but it might have been another superior. So since I was a member of the senior management team, I had other employees come to me to kind of vent and I would give them suggestions on what they could do to talk to their boss because I was friends with a lot of them. In other cases, my employee was coming to me because they were really struggling with a coworker. Now, I talked about that in last week's episode. What do you do when a coworker undermines you? Well, I believe in making sure that my employee has, again, exhausted every possibility with that other coworker before I intervened. Am I happy to interview? Well, yeah, of course. That's what I'm there for. I get paid the quote big bucks to support my employees. But oftentimes, you can work out the problem just talking to the person. So the boss is no different. Just talk to them, set those healthy boundaries. And sometimes, again, your boss just needs more information about how long a particular project takes. And that may be why they're throwing extra projects your way. They just don't realize that there's no way you can do it all without them either assigning someone to help you or prioritizing one project over the other. Now, with all that being said, remember life is way too short to invest your time in a job that's making you miserable. And if it's coming down to the fact that your boss is making you miserable, remember, begin networking. Update your resume. If you need help with that, we help people with that all the time. I also want you to watch an interview with a dear friend of mine. Her name's Emily Young. We did a fantastic interview not too long ago. It's called When It's Time to Pivot. And my dear friend went from working in a women's boutique. Now, granted, this was a fabulous women's boutique. It really was. But she went from that to becoming one of our state's top real estate agents. She is amazing. She's selling million-dollar homes like it's no big deal today. And the reason I wanted to interview her is that I knew she had an amazing story to share about when she knew it was time to leave. Now, in her case, she wasn't leaving because she was miserable at her job. She definitely did not have a horrible boss. It wasn't about that. This strategy is about when is it time to pivot? When do you know? And she knew it was time. She was ready for something new. So go back and watch that video. I think you're really going to enjoy it. It really kind of gives you a fresh perspective on when sometimes your career may be something entirely different. So what if that's happening to you right now? What if you're at your office and having to deal with the stress of what's going on to teach you a lesson that you could then learn and take with you for your next career opportunity? So don't give up hope. Remember, investing in yourself is not only a smart strategy, but you're worth it. All right, ladies, as we wrap up, just remember that you're not alone. We have all dealt with stressful situations like this. Remember that this podcast is here for you every single time you need to listen to topics like this to just decompress, to realize again that we're all in this together. So I hope this gives you a little inspiration and the action steps you need to remind yourself you really are in charge of your day. Now, if you need a little extra personal help, remember I offer one-on-one coaching. It's my favorite part of my business is being able to meet you personally and offer you some one-on-one guidance. We also have some do-it-yourself options. So just head back to drdonshoptalk.com to find out more to see if we can help you. Now, in the meantime, if you think the problem is that your boss is not only difficult, but your boss is really a perfectionist, I've got another great option for you. You can head over to our video literally called When Your Boss is the Perfectionist. I'll make sure to include it in the links, of course. And I think that's going to give you some additional tips that you can put in place right now. Don't forget that I share weekly tips on my socials, so be sure to check us out at Dr. Dawn Shop Talk. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Last but not least, have a terrific week, everyone, and never, ever forget, if you're not having a fantastic day, you've got the power to make it one. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next week right here on the Career Woman's Secret Playbook podcast. I know our episode is over, but this is just the beginning. If you're ready to take action but don't know where to start, just head over to drdonshoptalk.com for lots of free resources, ways to work together, and for even more. Subscribe to the Dr. Dawn Shop Talk YouTube channel. Remember, ladies, you don't have to take this journey alone. I've got you covered. Till next time.